You are listening to the Wildlife Photography Podcast with Rob Reed and Josh Galicki, bringing together the love of nature and photography. Episode 46. We discuss elitism in wildlife photography. Well, hello everybody, and welcome to the Wildlife Photography Podcast with me, Rob Reed, and my co-host Josh Galicki. Josh, how's it going?
Good, Rob. How are you?
Yeah, I'm all right. I'm all right. What have you been up to?
Spring is, we've had some warm weather over the past couple of weeks, and spring is really moving along here in the northeastern United States. And I've really been busy with my garden, believe it or not, Rob. I've got a pollinator garden that I cut back. I cut back every year. I cut it back about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and everything's coming back right now. And I'm adding some things in, and I really want to spend some time throughout the summer and even actually this spring too with my macro rig. And I've already gotten some really cool species in there. I had a zebra swallowtail the other day. If folks know this butterfly, it's a stunning butterfly. I've had some monarchs come through already. We're a little too soon for the hummingbirds. Ruby-throated hummingbirds will be coming back. But I'm doing my best, and I've been working at this for many years now. And every year I try to expand it a little bit. And I've making my own native habitat through this pollinator garden. And I took on another project because I guess I'm a glutton for punishment. I'm rewilding my shoreline. Essentially, it was just grass before for many years. And, I kind of tore the grass up, and I'm putting all native plants down there, like Spartina patens and seaside goldenrod. I've got some Carolina sea lavender, all these different types of rush grasses too. So I'm trying to really bring it back to what it should be.
I know who you've been talking to get some advice. Yeah.
Oh, yes, for sure. But a couple of people thankfully have helped me out, and I've got a couple apps that I've been working with too to help identify certain things, because you have to figure out what's invasive and what's not.
Yeah.
And we've got a lot of invasives down here, most notably Phragmites, which have come. That's an Australian species. I'll have to blame Georgina for that one, but. It's been really enjoyable just getting things set up, and I'm looking forward to see how it produces throughout the year, and hopefully take a lot of pictures.
It's so rewarding, isn't it, at the end of it?
Oh, it is.
When you do stuff like that.
Getting your hands in the dirt. The weeding part I don't like as much, but eventually, as things are starting to grow together now because it's been a couple of years. So as things grow together and everything gets thicker and bigger, I won't have to bother as much. But it's been taking up a decent amount of my spare time, and I've been out shooting too. There's some of the songbirds are back. It's still pretty early. I was out yesterday. Some early warblers are here, and most of the ducks have moved out. The owls are gone for the wintering owls are gone for the most part. But it's been busy gardening and shooting. Can't beat it.
I mean, it sounds like things are very similar here actually to what they are in the States. I mean, we've had some warm weather recently as well. For once, and all the migrants are coming in. I spent a day with Victoria this past week. We went out on the Somerset levels, there's a lot of migrants coming in. I mean, swallows and house martins, in numbers. And things like the warblers were back. I was hearing blackcap, and there were reed warbler in the sort of reed beds, and and then you're hearing things like booming bittern and stuff like that. It was just really nice to go out there. And I've been to Somerset levels a couple of times in the last week or two. Once on my own, and then I met Vic. We had a morning out there, and we got some nice great crested grebes. We got the weed done.
Oh, great!
So I thought we were a bit too late actually for that, because it's normally a little bit earlier in the spring when they did. But we were treated to that, and I think I came back from that session with something like 6,000 pictures or something daft. It was just
oh my goodness. I mean, grebes and loons are special to me. I like them more than waterfowl. They're a bit Jurassic. They look more ancient to me, and they're just prettier.
Yeah, exactly. And in the spring, they've got these fantastic crest feathers, and
Oh,
and the way they flare them, and they look at each other, and they interact.
the
It's just
displays are incredible,
yeah,
right? Yeah.
it's amazing. So yeah, we had a great day out there, and I'm looking at going back, because I think they should have chicks pretty soon, because of there were a couple that were on nests. So I'm just looking to go back and do some of that. And then I've been out, local lakes again still, and of course, you've got things like ducklings and stuff like that.
Mm,
And it's just, and I don't know, it gives you a real lift, doesn't it, when when you get into those situations, you see this sort of new life coming along, and
yeah.
all the trees are sort of coming out with fresh leaf, and you're looking forward to orchid season and that sort of thing. So yeah, it's with the weather being so nice, it's just the winter now seems like a long time ago. Sort of put that rain behind us. It was horrendous. I mean, the UK is wet, right? But oh my
We've got a
Lord.
dry spring, believe it or not. I mean, my yard, I was cutting the grass yesterday, and it's fairly dusty, believe it or not. We got a little bit of rain today, and hopefully it'll rain well in the next week or so. But it's been fairly dry where which is unusual. This is really the wet
Yeah,
season, so we'll see what
yeah,
happens.
yeah. We got a dry week forecast, so I'm looking to try and get down. I mean, I'm so busy with other things, but I looking to try and get down to the Somerset levels again at some point. And of course, I know that in the not too distant future, I mean, we're staring May in the face, so maybe in about 4 weeks' time there'll be that dragonfly roost again
Mm,
that I photographed a few years ago. I've been meaning to go back and do it again, and because it is just the most amazing thing to see when you get a good year. But yeah, so that'll be in 4 weeks. But yeah, like you, I guess I'm looking forward to the macro lens again, and I actually got some extension tubes as well. Finally, I just decided I was going to do that, and I've been
mm.
messing around with those, with the 24 to 120 as well, and that's been quite interesting.
It's great to have extension tubes because if you don't have a macro lens on you, you can put them on. I had a 70 to 200 I shot with a lot over the years. It was an older model, but I'd always have an extension tube with me. If I saw something that I wanted to shoot and get close to, I'd put that extension tube on, and you get pretty close to a macro image.
Yeah, you
It's not one
do.
to one, but you get pretty close.
Yeah, I
Certainly,
was messing
you
around
can
with blue.
focus close.
Yeah, I was messing around with bluebells. Actually, that's the other thing I did. I did go had just a quick 2 hour session in the bluebell woodland the other day doing slow shutter, which actually resulted in a few nice things. So it's
Mm,
yeah. So I've been just opening myself up to all sorts of things, and I have been away recently as well, and I started doing urban birds. So I was messing around with those in the city, and with almost like a street photography style approach, and I just had such great fun doing that. So yeah, I'm doing all sorts of things. Been
mm.
been feeling quite creative recently. So
That's great.
yeah. Anyway, so the topic for this podcast again was your idea. So give us the background on the thought for it.
Yeah, it came across my mind, Rob, the other day. A high school friend of mine, well, actually, I haven't spoken to her in many, many, many years. We went to high school together, and she sent me a note. She's not a photographer. She shoots casually, I suspect, with her iPhone, but she wanted to get a camera to shoot portraits of her family and do some nature stuff. And she asked me, could you recommend a kit? And I asked her what her budget was, and I started going online, and I recommended for her, it was a Canon R50, and they had a setup where you get two lenses. I think it was maybe a 24 to 105, and there was a longer lens that came with it, two kit lenses essentially, and the full rig was like almost $1,600. And she was a little surprised at that, maybe, but it got me thinking in terms of how expensive things are when it comes to entering the wildlife photography space. And in a way, the amount of money that people have to pay to get their gear set up, it can be a barrier to entry, and we've talked a little bit about this in some past episodes, but more importantly, I think it's creating in some ways, and I've seen it, and I think you've seen it as well. We were talking a little bit about the podcast before we got on. It's created some attitudes and some outlooks that I don't think are necessarily healthy. And But I think there's counterpoints to that too that we can discuss as we go through the conversation. So I thought it was a good idea to talk about
Yeah,
this because
because it's
people
not.
define by gear.
Yeah, because it's not just about gear, though, is it?
No.
It extends beyond that, because it's about sort of access to the opportunity as well, or the
Mm,
opportunities.
yeah.
Um, and if money um, isn't a problematic resource, then that does open up, a lot more opportunity for those that are lucky enough to be in that situation. So, it's there is that to it. Um, Going beyond gear, because it will take you places around the world. It will take you on, you know, these tours, these expensive tours that people like to go on, and just give you so many more opportunities, and will give you access to coaching and mentorship and all this sort of thing.
Yeah.
That
It's
perhaps,
paid access,
yeah,
right?
paid out exactly. And it's kind of sort of leads on to what we were talking about in the last episode that we did about, um, the sort of, this sort of approach to very formulaic approach to wildlife photography, and going into paid hides and paid situations to go and replicate images you've seen online. I mean, it's,
Hmm.
there is a bit of that to it as well. So I think it does go beyond the gear. It does go beyond the gear.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense because certainly you have to pay for the gear, but a lot of these images, especially the images people chase all around the globe, you need to have the time to do it, the resources to travel. You're paying private guides, and in some cases, you're paying for access to locations that the public can't even get to, even if they're in that area, right? I mean, I've seen this in Africa when I was in, where was I? It was Mbaseli. You could pay extra money and get into these conservation areas where they'll let you out of the vehicle, they'll give you a ranger, but everything is a cash is a cash basis, and people with unlimited cash, they're able to do that, right? They can get access and then get driven right up to some of these tuskers. They get out of the vehicle, they lay down, and they get the shot. But so it's a resource question,
Yeah,
not a skill question.
yeah, and I think I remember you saying something about, um, those people that were able to access those places at the times of day when the light was at its best. When you're coming out of the park and they're going in, and you're
Yeah,
thinking, "Hang on a minute," and this is all about what I'm able to pay, right?
absolutely.
You know, so, in those sort of situations, I think there is definitely an imbalance. Let's put it that way. But I think out of everything, I think time is the thing for me. If
Mm.
time is that resource that I think is probably the most important. And if you've got more time, then I think you've got more advantage, over others. But let's sort of pivot back to, and let's start talking about gear.
Mm.
Where do you think that sort of, because there are people out there that aren't satisfied. It seems to me, and I think we've all come across them, that aren't satisfied unless they've got the most modern, up to date camera body, for example. The most recent, and fastest lens they can get.
Mm.
Where do you think that comes from?
Maybe it's just part of human nature. I mean, you meet many people like this, whether it's a new car, getting the newest car or getting the newest upgrade. So it could be part of our nature, frankly. But it has become a dominant factor, I think, in the wildlife photography community, and not in a great way. Because, I mean, thankfully, we've talked about this a little bit too. Being a great photographer and being able to compose and take great images, that's the equalizer, right? That's the strongest thing. But I'll tell you, Rob, I can't count how many times I was in an incredible situation where I'm seeing something unfold, right? I mean, whether it's a behavioral element or the light's incredible and there's just a fantastic scene and I'm taking an image, and a photographer will come up to me and the first thing they'll say is, well, not, oh, how are you shooting this? Isn't this amazing? It's always, oh, what are you shooting with? Oh, I see you've got, and it's like, really? Is that the question? Is that the most important thing right now? And I think that's just illustrative for how important gear seems to be for most people. And they essentially put a heavier weight on the gear and gear acquisition, what they call gas gear acquisition syndrome, which I kind of like that acronym, but they put such a heavy weight on it that it overcomes everything else, right? Photography is almost second uh, for some folks, and I think that's unfortunate.
Yeah, it's almost like they feel it's required to take the best image. They need to take it with the most, the most up-to-date camera body, the most expensive thing they can get. I mean, I was stopped. This is a very similar story actually, because I was stopped. Well, I mean, literally, I don't know, 10 days ago, something like that. I was out on one of the trips I went to the Somerset Levels, and I was walking along, and I had the Z9 on, and I think the 180 to 600 or something. And I was walking along, and this guy was in a small group of people, and I didn't spot what camera it was. I knew it was a Nikon. I didn't sort of clock what it was until we started chatting, and because he was looking at a bird and he didn't know what it was, and I said, "Oh, no, that's," told him, and we started talking, and he said, "Oh," he said, "What have you got there? Is that the Z9?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Oh, that's a nice camera." He said, I've only really just been able to get the, he had it turned out he had a D850. Said to him, "That is the best DSLR ever made." I said,
Yep.
I had one of those, and I'm sorry, actually, I got rid of it. I sold it because I didn't really end up using it. I said, but honestly, that's a really good camera. It's just that they'll never make a DSLR better than that because they've stopped making them. So, don't be embarrassed by that at all. It's a great camera, and anyway, off he went. But I mean, I think that's symptomatic of an attitude, actually. And I did find, again, I found myself in a hide a few days later, which I don't tend to visit a lot of hides, but I was sort of in there just to see what was around more than anything else, rather than sort of necessarily photographic opportunities. And there were quite a few photographers in there with the long lenses and everything. And anyway, somebody clearly was shooting a DSLR because it was
the old mirror slap.
Yeah, and it kind of takes you by surprise now, because you expect everything to be silent. I almost found myself going, tutting and going, "Oh," and then I'm thinking, what am I doing? It's like, I mean,
Yep.
That's me almost being a snob, and I just, and I caught myself doing it and thought, no, it's just, why not? It's completely acceptable to, for somebody, to still have a DSLR, and if we forget, because actually I don't come across it that often anymore.
Yeah. I always have to step back too. And a lot of people have that mindset. If somebody walks by, you have two photographers walking by. One photographer has a 600 millimeter f4 on carbon fiber tripod, and they've got all this gear. The first reaction most people will have is, "Oh, they're serious. They must be a really good wildlife photographer. They're serious. Look at the money they've spent." Versus another photographer walking in with maybe an old zoom lens, like, "Oh, okay, they're probably more novice or amateur and they're just getting into it." Well, that really has nothing to do with it. I mean, the photographer with the older zoom lens may certainly be the better photographer and the more experienced photographer, but we put such a heavy weighting on the type of gear and the expense of the gear that people are walking around with. And it's not always a one-to-one. I mean, you have situations where people are pros, certainly, and they've been shooting for many years, and they'll upgrade their gear. And while they've spent a ton of money on it, because we all have, it's something they're passionate about and they're willing to invest the money. I get that. But there's a lot of people out there that go right to just upgrading their gear to the best that there is, and then just continually getting the new gear as it comes out. And if that's the focus isn't necessarily going to be on photography all the time. It's just going to be on upgrading the gear. Yeah.
And it's on appearance in front of your peers, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And I guess there's, to a degree, is there an embarrassment about gear if your gear is old amongst something? I mean, it's never has been for me. I mean, I remember, I think people who listen to the podcast regularly will remember me saying this before, but I shot with a D800, Nikon D800 for years.
Yeah.
For years, and probably, I mean, when did they come out? 2013, something like that. I think it was 2022. I was still shooting with it.
Hmm.
2021, 2022, still shooting with it, and producing some great stuff. I mean, all right, you now look at the Z9 compared to that, and you go, well, yeah, I mean, the autofocus, the frame rate, the quality, the ISO performance. I mean, it's just a different world. Because I'm always, that's the great. I have to say that is the great thing about. I think when you spend a little bit more money on more expensive kit, it does open up more opportunity to push the gear harder, I think.
Yeah.
Not only in terms of its performance, things like autofocus and ISO. I think, those are frame rates. I think they're probably three of the most important things for in a wildlife photography context, but also the way they're made. I mean, that Z9 is built like a tank, and I was out recently and got caught in a very heavy downpour. I mean, it was monsoon type conditions, and I was actually in a city at a conference, so along with a lot of other photographers, and I remember in the end I thought, no, this is just too much. This is really, I'm getting completely soaked because I wasn't prepared for it, and I was only a short jog from the hotel, so I thought it's no problem. And of course, so I was completely unprepared, and I was getting a right royal soaking. So in the end, I sought shelter, and there was another guy there, another photographer there, who was sort of joking away about me being, I mean, I was dripping wet, saying, oh, is your camera going to be okay? I said, yeah, this thing's built like a tank, so it'll be fine. And of course it was. But I mean, there's the difference. I mean, when you do spend the money, so I get it if it's if it's, you're seeing, I think if you see it as a tool for the business rather than as like going and buying a flashy car for, you're not driving it to its full potential because you can't drive the car at the speeds and the performance that it will give you.
Mm-hmm.
You're just it's there for appearance's sake.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the issue comes in. If you're making your living from it, and you're creating images that require your creativity is making full use of the advancements in the technology. That's, I think, what I'm trying to get at here. Then you're justifying the actual acquisition of that, and you're using it to its full potential, as opposed to just having it, as something that is just you're just showcasing your ability to be able to afford it.
Yeah, absolutely. And
snobbery involved in that, I think.
Yeah, I agree, Rob. And it's interesting, you're talking about technology. I gave a talk to a camera club not that long ago. I think it was about a week and a half ago, and they asked me to do a topic and do a discussion on exposure theory for wildlife photography, right? And it was interesting because as I was putting the slide deck together, and I was talking about some of the advancements in technology that we've had over the past couple of years, clearly the advancement from DSLR to mirrorless, right? And what technology has done, it's lowered the skill level, frankly, across the wildlife community, because so many things are done for us now. Look at exposure. You could essentially look through a digital viewfinder now and set your exposure. You don't have to chimp. You don't have to play around and get in the ballpark and look at your LCD screen and say, okay, well, I need to go stop brighter, or adjust.
At which time the
aperture.
opportunities passed you by.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, the technology now has gotten so good, and the camera industry is really, in my opinion, thanks to their advancements in these cameras, it's really lowered the skill level. But in a way, it opens up some opportunities, but it's raised the spending floor too, I think. So, in many ways, if you want assistance to have your exposure through a viewfinder, have a mirrorless camera, right, where you could set your exposure through the viewfinder, you can have AI tracking for autofocus, all of these things, you're going to have to throw out the money, and you're going to have to spend to get these things. And it's not cheap, right? So I'm a Canon shooter. If I'm shooting with an R5, shooting with an R3. I mean, you're talking 35, 3,600, 5, $6,000 for these camera bodies. So you have to spend a lot more to get these capabilities. Are they essential and required in the field? No, they're not. You can certainly you can certainly capture similar images with an older DSLR, but it just frankly makes it a lot easier, right? So people want that ease, and they're going to have to spend more money, and that's been going on too a lot recently. I've seen with, especially across the photography community, everybody, there's this push to, if somebody has a D850 like the guy you ran into not that long ago, everyone feels like, oh, I've got to upgrade. I've got to upgrade. And I'm sure the camera industry loves this, right? They want this to happen. But yeah, I would say it's easier to take good images now, but there's a price to pay for that. And
Yeah, I mean,
not everybody can pay that price.
and it's when you look at a picture on social media, it's very, very unusual for you to be able to tell the difference between, let's say, a D850 and a Z9, for example. So
especially on Instagram, right? I mean,
yeah, I mean, and oh, hang on a minute, or you say, okay, well, I might have shot it with a Z9, but I had to use my old 200 to 500 with the adapter, right? So the old F mount there. Can you tell? No, you're not going to, but can you tell in the field? Yeah, because you can see it, and you turn around and say, oh well, but you're using an F mount lens, it's old glass, blah blah. And I think there can be a certain attitude with people to that, and it's just like, oh well, you got a nice new camera, but you've got old glass, so you've got to upgrade the glass. I mean, I did it myself, and I think there's a lot of pressure that the camera companies do put on the way they market these things, for you to upgrade the glass. I mean, the glass is better, right? We know it's better, but you're not necessarily going to see it for the majority of applications that most people put their work through. So you're putting it on social media, you're not going to tell the difference.
No, not at all. And some of these YouTube videos where you see some of these on the photography channels, they test certain lenses, and I mean, they're zooming into a dollar bill and they're talking about chromatic aberration in these little things. It's like, give me a break. And in what world is that going to matter, frankly, right? And when you get into all this gear talk and this comparison of this is razor sharp, this is slightly soft, etc., you're not even really talking about photography at that point. You're missing the whole subject, right? And it changes the conversation, and it's gear talk disguised as photography, but it's not photography.
I mean,
it's completely different.
I may have told this story before, so apologies if I have, and people go, oh, anyway. But I remember at Bird Fair one year when we used to do the Bird Photographer of the Year exhibition. So we used to have A3 prints, framed of the winning images, and some of them, I think one of them in particular was taken with Micro Four Thirds at the time, and that was when Olympus were coming in.
That's Olympus, right?
Yeah. They were coming in and starting to support the competition at that point, and we just happened to have one of the images that was on display was Micro Four Thirds. The rest were generally taken with, I mean, at that time it was the 850 out, but the equivalent, the top end DSLRs, because mirrorless wasn't a thing back then. And I remember saying to somebody, go and try and find the image that's been taken with Micro Four Thirds in print, because they reckon they were pretty good at spotting these things. They couldn't do it because, and you're talking something that's pretty big large enough in print to.
Yeah, what's that, 13 by 19, right? I mean, that's a good size
to pick up something like that. And people struggled even back then. So, and that's a large print. So if you think you're going to do it on, on a screen that's displaying no pixels at all, think again.
I mean, I recently have posted some camera trap images I take with my Canon Rebel. I bought that camera in 2011, 2012. It's considered ancient, and people will comment on social media, the resolution's incredible. What camera are you using? And it's like, oh, hey, I'm using a Canon Rebel, right? So yeah, it's people can't tell.
Weren't those big, fat, juicy pixels actually pretty good? because I mean, they just perform better for those on those sort of smaller sensors. And if you're not pushing the if you're not pushing for a huge print or anything like that, why do you need anything else? I mean,
Yeah.
I laugh at myself sometimes when I look at images and I think, oh God, I've really got to crop in quite hard on that image to get the, because I couldn't get close enough, or whatever the situation might be, or there was a bit of action that I actually quite like, or I had to shoot it deliberately wide because the action was quite chaotic, so I didn't quite know where it was going to go, or those sort of situations. You go, oh, sometimes oh God, I've got to crop in, and I'm only going to end up with a 12 megabyte file at the end of it. And you're going, well, I was shooting that only 15 years ago. I was thinking this is the best thing since sliced bread, because I've got this camera that does this amazing 12 megapixel image. And so that's the reality of it. And I'm still selling images that I took with that camera through libraries because they're totally usable. I mean, it's crazy.
I agree. That's what some photographers need to ask too. I mean, what's the ROI on the investment in some of this gear, right? So like for me, I'm selling prints, and I do a lot of printing actually, and I'll need resolution, and if I'm going out and I'm
so why are you shooting Canon then if you need resolution?
I know, right? Well, that's a good question, believe it or not. And that's a question I've been asking myself for a couple of years now since they've gotten far
behind. That was a low blow.
I know it's all these NFL and these professional sports photographers. They ruin it for Canon. They've got the insight straight. But if you're buying, for instance, let's just say let's go with Canon. If you buy the R1, right, you're spending $6,000-7,000 for the body. You're shooting with a 600 f4, tack on another 15K, add in a couple of memory cards, maybe another $200-300, maybe a tripod, $400-500. I mean, so you could see how the money just adds up, right? You're getting close to $20,000 just in the field. If you're only posting those images on Instagram, is it worth it? I mean, a lot of people need to ask these questions, and it's like, what are you doing with your photography? If you're selling, you're making prints, you're selling images, you have a website, there's other things that you're doing with your images. Sure. I mean, and if you just want to spend the money and you like the gear and you like the setup, that's great too. But you should always think about, what's the return on investment on this, especially if your images are only going on Instagram or even Facebook for that matter. Facebook is a slightly larger format, but people should ask these questions. You should, sit back and say, am I blowing too much money on some of this stuff? And if they can, that's fine.
And the thing is, I only buy gear that I know I'm actually going to use. I mean, I sat down probably a year ago or more when I actually thought, no, I do want to move across to the Z mount glass. I just think it makes sense because this is where the future is for me, is in the mirrorless and the Z system, right? So so I got all my lenses together and I looked at the EXIF data on some of my images and I thought, right, what lenses do I use and which don't I use? And actually I had a 70-200 2.8 and I'm thinking, I don't really use it. I just for some reason it's just not a lens that, so I thought, right, if I don't use it, and of course I'll just sell it. So okay, I get a reasonable return on secondhand value on that. And so in the end I just sold all the F mount glass as it happened, and I thought, right, well, where am I, what do I want, what's going to be my most used lens from the offerings that they have on the Z mount system? And for me that was the 180-600, no question about it. So that had to be on the list. And then there's, well, you want something wider angle, but and I thought, well, I'll go for the 24-120, but I'll have the f4, right, rather than the 24-70 f2.8, a lot more money. I just thought, but I don't need a 2.8, not really. And that's been a really good lens. And then of course the macro. So that was a sort of 3 kit lens that I've, 3 lenses that I got. I've been borrowing an 800 recently, and you just think, yeah, that's great in certain situations, but it's quite limited. And I have found that very limiting for my style, when you've got something actually you want to be a little bit wider on because you've got some action kicking off, and sometimes that 800 could just be you're just too close, and you've got no
Yeah.
ability to change that situation. I mean, it's great for songbirds or things that are a little bit further away, obviously.
Yep.
But yeah, so it's like finding the gear that really suits the style of shooting you're doing, and I think you can find out who you are and your personality as a photographer without spending a fortune, and then commit to those, to those greater expenses later on down the line. I mean, if you think about it, you could pick up. I mean, I don't know what you could pick up a secondhand D850 for now, for example, but me being a Nikon shooter, but
I'm going to look this up as you're talking.
£500. But I would
See.
think, and you probably get a decent secondhand one. I mean, I would hazard a guess, and that was an expensive. I forget what they were new, but probably 2.5, 3 grand sterling. I would
Yeah, I
think.
mean, just under 1,000 in some spots. I don't know what
Dollars.
the yes, that's right, US
Yeah.
dollars. I don't know what the condition is, but that's not bad.
Yeah, it's for
$814.
£700. Yeah.
Not bad. Oh, I'm sorry, that's a D810. This one's a D850 here, 939. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's not bad at all. It's roughly around $1,000. It looks like if the condition's decent.
Yeah. So something like that, and then you put in I don't know, 200 to 500, something like that. You probably pick that up for, in terms of dollars, I would think 700, something like that. I would have thought those $700-800, and particularly if you're not buying through, let's say, a reputable secondhand dealership, and you buy privately, you've got a mate who's got one or whatever, you'd probably pick them up for less. So
yeah,
there's some good kit out there. But it's funny, isn't it? I mean, if you had two photographers stood together in a hide or whatever, one's got 15 grand worth of the latest gear and a 600 f4, and the other one's got, the equivalent, let's say, the D850 and a 200 to 500 lens, which probably to combine is going to cost them $1,500, right?
Yeah.
Who's got the more pressure on them to produce?
Oh, definitely the one with the expensive kit, no doubt. And I hate to say it, if I walked into a hide and they were both sitting there, I would think the more serious photographer is the one with the more expensive kit. I fall into that too. I mean, so it's a stereotype, and it's not good. But yeah, absolutely, to your point. That's a great question, Rob. The money invested by the individual with that expensive kit, there's definitely more pressure on them to produce.
Yeah. And the fact of the matter is that, and people will argue this point, but the fact of the matter is, in most situations, the guy with the 850 and the 200 to 500 versus the guy with the, I don't know, let's call it the Z9, and a 600 f4, right? The results, when you look at them, are not going to be too dissimilar. People are going to hate me for saying that, right? And they're, I know it's going to be controversial, but in most situations, there's going to be, a hair's breadth difference in it, difference in the results. There are times when that f4, I know the autofocus is faster, right? I know it lets in more light. You've got that. There's more glass in the front, so that you have more versatility with it. I know that. You've got better autofocus, obviously, in the Z9 than arguably, than the 850. The ISO performance is undoubtedly better in the Z9 over the 850. I can tell you that for a fact. So you've got all the modern thing, and you've got the AI tracking and everything else. But how much difference does that make in a lot of situations? Arguable.
Yeah. I mean, if you're shooting in low light, if there's an action sequence and some of these things, yeah. But I think it's incremental depending upon the situation. I mean, it could be a game changer if it's like fast action and you have the auto AI focus, certainly. But does that make that individual a better photographer? No, it doesn't. Actually, it lowers the skill. It lowers the skill level. It's just a lot easier to get those images in certain instances. So I think maybe I would venture to say, and I think you and I have done this, we've learned with less technology, and I think it helped us learn. I would have rather learn on the kit that I started with than start now with some of these areas. You just have a better understanding of exposure. You have a better understanding of the tools, and then when these advancements come about, you can take advantage of them. You really can. But I'll say that if somebody comes up to me and they start talking about the color science of Canon or the sharpness and look at the creamy background and all this, I just one ear and out the other. It's not, none of that stuff is really super important. If that's the most important thing you're going to talk about, go be an engineer, go work for Canon, go work for Nikon. You're not a photographer if that's your main goal.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree
I
entirely.
don't buy a camera and say I'm buying it for the sharpness. I am buying it for the color science. Come on. Come
I
on.
mean, but it comes back to your point, doesn't it? I mean, when we were, it's rather like if you've learned to drive in a manual car,
Mm.
your understanding of how a car works and how to drive, I think, is better than if you just let the car do everything for you and you sit in a modern automatic. I mean, you take yourself back. I mean, crikey, I've been driving for
I
nearly.
started with a manual too, and I'm thinking about the first time I stopped on a hill.
Yeah, yeah,
It was not
exactly. You do
good.
the hill start, right? But I mean, I've been driving for nearly 40 years, okay, and you can imagine what the cars were like 40 years ago, and I was driving 10-year-old cars then. So that
Yeah.
I'm driving cars when I first started driving that came out 50 years ago, and you had to really drive the car. You
Mm.
couldn't. It wasn't doing anything for you.
I,
So that,
what was your first car, Rob?
oh, it was a Chrysler Avenger.
Wow.
Yeah, it was 1970. It was a 1977 Chrysler
Mm.
Avenger in white. And I tell you, that thing, it didn't even have seatbelts in the back, and it had vinyl seats, right? So you know what it's like when you've just passed your test and you're young. It's kind of two speeds, it's flat out or stop, and I mean, it didn't go very fast. But I used to put my friends used to get in the back and used to go around a corner and they'd slide to one side of the car and then slide on these vinyl seats because you didn't have any seatbelts or anything. But that's actually quite a good analogy when you look at it in terms of photography, because I
Mm.
had to drive those cars, my first, because they did nothing for you.
Yeah.
Where I mean, it didn't have things like ABS even, on the braking systems. The front used to lock up. If you hit the brakes too hard, your fronts were locking up. So you didn't have
Yeah.
any of that ABS. So you had to learn to drive. And of
Yeah.
course, then you take those skills forward, and now I'm driving all these modern cars that do everything for you, but I can still do those things.
Yeah. It's
Whereas people
important.
that are learning to drive now, they don't have those skills
Yeah.
because they didn't have the older cars that actually did take some driving at the time. So, and I think it's the same with photography. Particularly with mirrorless, I mean, it does virtually, as you say, you can see the exposure through the viewfinder, which for me, it's like having an automatic car with ABS. I know how to
Yeah.
do it, but actually the driving experience is much nicer because I've got those things. And it's the same for me with mirrorless. The whole photography experience is so much nicer now because I can use the experience I've gained in previous years, and I can make the most of that modern technology. And I said one of the big advantages for me for mirrorless really is that seeing that exposure in real time, because being a creative photographer, I kind of want to know the effect without, as you were saying earlier, without having to take a few shots, with the experience that I've gained going, I probably need 3 stops over or 3 stops under here, or I need this, and then chimping and seeing, do I need to make any adjustments? I can do it on the fly now. I can do it through the viewfinder, and I can go, right, I'll try this, I'll try that, and I'm flicking back, and I'm not even taking my face away from the camera. It's just
Yeah.
you're doing it.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
all these things are intuitive anyway. You know where the buttons are. So I think the car analogy is probably quite good.
Yeah, I'm thinking about my first car. It was a 1986 Chevy Spectrum. It was a piece of crap. It was so bad. It didn't even have a tape deck, Rob. It only had like a radio, so I had to rip the radio off and put a tape deck in.
Mine didn't have a tape player either.
It was one of those things where, it was like It looked like a little needle, the old school thing. You'd
I
go right to
remember. Yeah,
left
yeah,
on
yeah.
it.
I
Yeah,
remember.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And
I
then
did
I
have
put a
one of these
tape
sort of
deck in.
great big expansive dashboards, very linear, weren't they? And it's yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah. And
yeah.
I put the tape deck in. I remember for whatever reason, I always had Aerosmith Permanent Vacation when I first got my license. I had that, and that was not that good of it. There was a couple good songs on that album, but it wasn't Toys in the Attic by any means. And I
Mm.
listened to that thing over and over again, driving my Chevy Spectrum. But yes, great analogy.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
we used to get this great big boom box and put it in the car because I didn't have I didn't have a stereo or anything. So we used to get this, put the, and of course it would last as long as the battery lasted, right? And I'd have things like, I don't know, I think I was playing White Snake and stuff like that on it.
Oh man, David Coverdale just retired, by the way. Yeah, it's interesting though when you're talking about travel. Travel is another thing when it comes to elitism, and it truly is. I mean, you're talking about you have to be in a specific socioeconomic class to pay for these trips.
Yeah,
Not only are you paying to travel the world, you're paying for guides, you're paying for, in many cases, upscale lodges. I mean, there's a whole tourism industry around this stuff. And if you want to get access to certain animals, I mean, take emperor penguins, for instance, down in Antarctica. I was talking to somebody recently, a photographer friend of mine. He reached out to another photographer to talk about, okay, well, how much does it cost to get down there? And I think he said the trip was like $75,000. So I'm like, $75,000? What? So people spend this money. And if you want to go to Africa and go on, and get in some really nice lodges and have access, I mean, it depends on where in Africa, but if you're going to East Africa, you're easily dropping with flights. I mean, this was 2019, you're 12, 13,000. So with flights now, 50, maybe you're talking $20,000. I mean, that's a lot of money. Not many people can, in many ways, if you're doing multiple trips and you're traveling consistently, that's way more expensive than the gear.
oh God, I mean, and there are people out there, because we've come across them and we know them, that will do multiple trips like that in a year
Yeah.
and have the time and have the financial resources to do it
Yeah.
without any form of concern. And that is, how many people are in that position?
Yeah.
Very,
Not
very
many.
few.
Not many.
And I know that, and we see images on social media that they'll post or in competitions or whatever, and of amazing species doing amazing things, and you go, oh God, isn't that great? Because yes, these species are coming out on social media, but there still aren't, in some instances, when you talk about Antarctica, for example, there still aren't that many people that have that sort of money to be able to go and do that. So that's going to limit the amount of photographs that are out there anyway, but naturally, because
And in some cases, Rob, I hate to say this, but I even question, I mean, certainly it's their photo. They clicked the shutter button, but is it really their photo? When you're paying to go into a blind and bait is thrown out and the barn owl comes in or whatever it is, are you really, in a sense, taking that image?
well, it
Yes,
harks back to our
mechanically.
last conversation, doesn't it? I mean,
Yeah,
it's exactly that.
yeah. I
Um,
mean,
I, I,
it's not even your skill, right? I mean, you're being shown the image, everything's being set up for you. You're essentially getting an opportunity handed to you on a plate, and you're just,
because you
you're
paid
eating the
for it,
food. Yeah,
because you
that's right.
paid for it. And if you're in a position to be able to do that, hey, great, good luck to you. And that's what you want to do. I mean, there's no, I don't think we're being judgmental here. We're just saying it as
Mm-mm.
it is. This is, that most people aren't in a position to be able to do that. So
Yep.
there is a separation there, and that's the point we're trying to make. There is a separation here because there are people out there with the opportunity, and there are people out there without the opportunity. And are we looking at, so when you look at the work of two photographers in different, I guess, financial situations and the time availability, the availability of time to those, are we, you're not judging apples with apples, are you,
Mm-mm.
at
And
that point?
and there's more pressure. I mean, take somebody, I'm grew up in Pennsylvania. So take somebody in Pennsylvania that doesn't have money to travel, right? Maybe they can go around and photograph white-tailed deer or songbirds or whatever's there, right? In order to come up with a really interesting composition, and you have to create your own luck, and it takes a lot more, in my opinion, a lot more brain power, and just better artistry to produce that image. And you're probably doing it with a cheaper kit too, right? So maybe you can expose in the viewfinder. You've got a chimp. You've got to be ready. So the ladder is a little harder to climb when you're in a situation like that versus paying for a guide and being taken to a snow leopard site in the Himalayas.
Yeah, I mean, how many
It's
of us are going
completely
to have
different.
that opportunity? I mean, it's,
That's right.
you know,
That's right. And there's nothing wrong with either, but I think it takes a lot more. It takes there's more skill in one situation versus the other, in my opinion.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, and as I said, I mean, I guess you could, argue you can get yourself into a position of being able to photograph some more of these in these expensive locations if you work towards it. If if you work in the industry, for example, and you're working towards it. But as I said, for the average person, I mean, for us, right? If we were to lead a tour, we probably in a situation now where we could effectively get a trip to, well, maybe not Antarctica, but certainly somewhere reasonably exotic and probably not affordable for most people, leading a trip there and get other people to pay for it. Effectively, we get a free trip. I mean, that's the way it works, right? We're probably in that situation, but how long has that been for us to be able to work to that situation we're now in? I mean, and we've done things like, this podcast, which we've been doing now for what, 4 years? I mean, we do it because, and don't get me wrong, we're not doing it because we're thinking, 4 years down the line we could get.
We're doing it for the coffee, Rob. Come on,
we're doing it for the coffee. Which people have been kindly buying us. So thank you very much for the coffee. But we do it because we actually love. Well, we've always liked chatting, haven't we? And actually, it's good just to record a conversation because I love having a topic to talk about. And we just do it because we love it. And actually, I don't think we'd have continued doing this if we didn't like doing it, because it becomes a chore then, doesn't it?
Oh, I agree. I mean, we both have a passion for this. It's a calling.
Yeah,
it is.
It is. So, so we're probably in a situation where we could now do that, but it's taken a lot of hard work, and we're not in a situation where we can't afford to do the odd thing, but we're not spending 70 grand going down to Antarctica every year.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong, with people who want to do that. If they have the resources and they want to spend the money. I mean, baiting is another situation, but if you have the money and you can travel the world and take amazing photos, I think that's great. I think the key here, though, what we're talking about is that should not be a standard that's expected for all photographers. You can go out in your garden behind your house or no matter where you live and create great images. You should not feel pressured, and other photographers should not pressure you that you have to spend X amount of dollars and travel to this exotic location to become a good wildlife photographer and have great images. That should not be the expectation.
I think that's the essence of it. Absolutely. I think it's so well said, because if the expectation is that you have to have the f4 lens and you have to have the Z9 or equivalent mirrorless Magician that costs as much as a car, well, not quite, but you know what I mean. How off-putting can that be? It just doesn't need to be that way.
That's elitism.
That is exactly right. That is elitism, and whereas you can produce amazing images with a $500 camera that you might have to buy one secondhand, for example, but you don't. You could do that in a $500 lens.
That's right.
and you really can. I mean, if you look at, and you don't have to travel. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, I always hark back to Andy Parkinson's portfolio of swans, for example. I mean, mute swan, you couldn't get anything more common than a mute swan, right? Everybody knows what it is. Everybody's got access to them. Well, if you're in the northern hemisphere, and but you know what I mean, or an equivalent of a mute swan. Everybody's got those common species on their doorstep, which they can go to time and time again. I mean, I said I was photographing gulls the other day. I mean, easy. They're confiding. They're coming right up to you. There's plenty of them around. I mean, you're not going to have difficulty, most people, in photographing gulls and getting pretty close, particularly in urban situations. But then you're putting your mind to, how can I actually make this interesting? How can I produce an interesting portfolio of images? How can I generate some ideas here to work with these species? And it doesn't matter that they're common. It's what you're getting across to the viewer is the originality of the content that you're creating, not what the character is necessarily in the content. And I think that, I said, that portfolio of Andy's just always sticks in my mind because it was so complete, and every picture within that, on the stuff that he produces with that species is, it's very innovative and it's very personal to him. And I remember him describing, him getting used to the group of swans that he worked with. He went back again and again and again and worked with the same group. And I think that's a great template for people to look at and work with. And for my mind, it's the originality of the image that shines through, not the gear you've taken it with necessarily, or the places you've been to get it. So great images are within the reach of virtually everybody.
Yeah. And it should be about upgrading your vision, not necessarily your gear all the time. That's the most important thing. And if you go out in the field and you've got a kit that's $500-$600, don't be embarrassed by that. This is not, a lot of people think it's a status game. Photographers do think that. It's unfortunate. I mean, look, that's the reality of it. People look at your gear, they ask questions about that. I get more questions about gear in the field than I do what images I'm taking, as I was saying before. While some people want to view it as a status competition type thing, it should not be. And if you have a basic kit, or you didn't invest a lot of money in it, no big deal. Do not be embarrassed by that, because it's by far not the most important thing. It's your eye and what's in your head and what you want to compose. Those are the most important things, undoubtedly.
Yeah, invest in your experiences and your knowledge, and just go out there and shoot. And just, we said before, I mean, actually some of the best sessions I have, I kind of come away with nothing, but I've learned something. And I think if I've learned something, or it gives me an idea that I can then work on in future sessions, then that's a real win. And that's what I want to invest in myself. I'm not interested really. I mean, there's loads of talk about the Z9 II, for example. Oh, it's interesting. Am I going to upgrade?
Yeah. What's the point?
Because but isn't it interesting talking about, just going off on a tangent here slightly, but talking about technology and where it's got to, and this is something we have again touched on briefly, is how long has that Z9 now been out? 5 years, 6 years?
That's a good question. I'm not a Nikon shooter, but
I think it's
I remember when it came
5.
out and I saw the resolution and I was pissed, because I feel like,
at least
to your
5.
point, Canon, everything's 24 megapixel.
But you remember the development of the DSLR, and how quickly that technology moved on, and how quickly those new models came out and everything else. Everything has slowed down now. Have you noticed?
Yeah, which is actually a great thing, in my opinion.
Exactly. Yeah. So where are you going?
2019, 2020.
Yeah. Where are you going to take the Z? And I know where what they're going to be working on. I think, they're going to be doing pre-capture in RAW. The frame rate's going to be quicker. The noise, the way they deal with high ISO, for example, and is probably going to be better. There's probably going to be some development on the video quality and everything else, and that's really where they're taking it, isn't it? But I mean, you know, okay, so we might get 30 frames a second as opposed to 20 frames a second. I don't know. I don't know where it's going. Do I? Oh God, I'm struggling with coping with 20 frames a second. Quite frankly, the amount of
I feel like there's
photographs
a
I
big,
come back with.
correct me if I'm wrong too, Rob. I mean, I felt like there was a big difference between, 10 frames, 12 frames a second, and 18 frames a second. But between 30 frames a second and 40 frames a second, I feel like there's no, it's,
Yeah.
as we can, as these frame rates continue to increase and increase, I feel like the less and less
But
it
it
is in
comes with
terms
its
of,
own, it comes with its own problems as well, doesn't it? I mean, I went literally, I went out for 2 hours day before yesterday, and I thought, oh, I'll go to a local lake. I just need to get out. I need to get some fresh air. And I just need to, I need to press the shutter. I don't care what it is. There was not, there were very, very few subjects around, and yeah, the light was okay, but it wasn't, it wasn't brilliant. And I came back with 3,500 pictures. So it's just, and you just think, how did I manage that when there wasn't a
yeah,
great deal around? And because I was just experimenting and messing around with a few things, and I just think, well, I've come back with 3,500, and most of that is because I couldn't be bothered to shift from, 20 frames a second to 6 or something like that. But and I was just hammered down on a lot of things because I just wanted to see how it looked.
yeah.
But but that creates its own, and then you sit in front of the screen for about 5 times the amount of time you're actually in the field, just going through and just literally culling these things.
Yeah, it
And
takes a lot
reviewing.
of time.
Yeah, it takes a hell of a lot of time.
You were talking about something before, Rob, and I think maybe we both touched on this in the conversation. It got me thinking too, when it comes to advice for gear for folks. I think it's important to buy gear that suits your photographic style. So I
Oh,
think
100%.
versus buying the best gear that may not necessarily suit your style. So, if if you're not keen on action or behavior or low light images, you really don't need to get, if you're a Canon shooter, an R1, or if you're a Nikon shooter, a Z9, and et cetera, name your camera brand. And if you don't need to get tight portraits with creamy backgrounds of little birds on sticks, well, then maybe you don't even need a 600, right? So it depends on your style, and you should buy the gear that suits your vision and your style. It shouldn't be the other way around. You shouldn't back into it based on buying the best gear.
Yeah, I mean, let's face it. If you're shooting urban birds and you're doing it, maybe with a candid street photography style, you
Yeah.
don't want an f4 600, do you? It's just going to be it's going to hinder
Yeah.
you because it's too damn
Yeah.
heavy. It's too damn long. You're going to want a light camera. You're going to want I don't know, 24 to 120 for, you take my example.
Great stuff with a point
Or-
and shoot, frankly. You can walk up to a pigeon. It's pretty
Exactly right.
easy.
Exactly right. So that's a good case in point. But as you're saying, if you're shooting songbirds and you want that portrait style image in the traditional way, then yeah, you probably do need, a 600 f4,
Yeah.
because it's going to be tough for you, and you probably need a converter as well because it's going to be tough for you otherwise to replicate the images that are out there taken with that sort of stuff, because you can't get as close to they're smaller, right? You can't get as close to them, generally speaking.
Yeah.
So and to create that sort of background separation and everything else, you need the longer focal length. It's obvious. But so yeah, I think that is a great point, is think really, really hard about who you are as a photographer and the sort of images that you want to take, and get the kit that suits that. Don't get the kit that everybody else has got because you think that's what's required. It's
Yeah.
much more important to actually get the kit that's going to give you the results that for the style that you want to shoot. And
And the times have changed, right? I mean, years ago, it used to be, I mean, you're going back to film, you go back to the 90s earlier. I mean, it was kind of a good old boys club. There were only a few people doing this. The gear was very high. I mean, it was very expensive, and it was very specialized, and you only had a few people shooting. The good news is now there's more and more people out in the field every year. And camera gear is so much more accessible than what it used to be in terms of cost, in order to get in, whether you can get a great zoom lens, a used body, and everything else. But the important trap not to fall into is you don't have to define yourself by your gear, and you don't want to fall into peer pressure to constantly upgrade and spend. You can easily spend 20, 30, 40, $50,000 on gear, whereas you don't necessarily need that. And that doesn't define you as a photographer. So it's great that it's easy to get into now. There's more and more photographers. You can easily get the gear to get the shots, but there's much more pressure. And it's just what it is. There's all that pressure from a lot of photographers and they see photographers and they grade photographers based on their gear. And it's just not right.
And you don't have to buy a camo wrap for it either.
I'm guilty of that one, I have to say. And that's mostly for resale value, so the paint isn't nicked. Yep.
Forever practical, but but it's a good, because I think there is a uniform, isn't there?
Yeah.
Within all walks of life, and it's not just photography. It's pretty much everywhere, because it's kind of an expected. It's almost like a tick box. It's almost an expected thing, because if you do that sort of thing, then you're taken seriously. You're instantly labeled as a wildlife photographer if your lens is covered in a camo cover. I don't bother. I mean, I just don't see the point. But not for my style. There's just no, why would I do it? It's just, I just don't shoot like that, and but it just comes back to the sort of uniform thing and other people's perception of you. When you walk into some of these places, it's like, you want to be taken seriously, and I think that's where a lot of people choose their kit based on that. And it's like, if I don't have the best things, I can't take the best photographs, and it's absolute nonsense.
Yeah, totally.
Nonsense. And
even the clothing to a certain extent is nonsense. This is completely anecdotal. I have no data to support this, but the best wildlife photographers I meet in the field, they are not all camoed up. They just aren't, Now they're not wearing white sneakers either, and standing out in the middle of the field, but at the same time, they're not always the best photographers.
No, I think I was wearing a t-shirt and shorts and dripping wet in that scenario I gave you. And just messing around, but I mean, I'm like you. I just wear practical clothing. I'm not bothered about camo stuff or whatever. I just quick drying walking trousers, walking boots, whatever. That's me, generally speaking. But
I just stay away from bright colors. That's the only thing I try to do is stay away from the white sneakers or just the bright reds and so forth.
Well, I think anything that sort of makes you obvious. But the thing is, if you sit still, and we've said it before, it's like, it's amazing what will just walk up to you. And
that's another sign of an experienced photographer versus an inexperienced, at least in wildlife photography, is that the kind of twitchy itch, like the impatience. I see that all the time. Like I'll be with a few photographers in some locations where, there's a lot of people coming in and out, like wildlife refuges and stuff. And they'll say, hey, what are you shooting? I'm like, oh, I'm shooting this. I'm waiting for this to happen. And they'll shoot a couple shots. And then sure enough, maybe a minute later, then they just move on, right? There's that lack of field craft. That's
so
always kind of a clear
if I
sign.
move on and go somewhere else, what am I missing elsewhere? It's almost like a fear of missing out on something, isn't it? And actually, that brings me to another point. Is like, how often are we out and people are just focused solely on one thing, and they have one thing in mind. So I can think of a situation, again, I've mentioned it before, I'm sure, where at my local lakes there were a group of photographers that were being, I think it was an organized thing, organized workshop, and they were solely focused on otters. And that was it. And there was a singing chatty's warbler right out in front of them in beautiful light, which is a thing that skulks around in the undergrowth most of the time. You don't see. And they're all focused on. I said, there's a chatty's warbler singing away there. Oh, we're not interested in that. We're just, so you get so myopically focused on one thing, you're missing everything else that's around you, and more great shots that could, you could get. I mean, I tend to go out with a kind of idea of what I want to do, but more often than not, I end up doing something completely different because I've come across something else that's actually caught my attention and I found really, really interesting. And I like the surprise of that. And I just think keep your mind open. And actually, the best photographers I know, without exception, are people that are fascinated by all aspects of nature and are just intrigued by everything,
Yeah.
just have curious minds.
Yeah, you're right. Curiosity's that's the key, Rob.
That
I think the same way. They're curious.
Yeah, and they are the photographers that do well in competitions. They are the photographers that keep on churning out work that does well on social media, and I think they are the most fulfilled photographers as well.
Yeah, you're right. It's not the photographer that says, "Look what I know and look what I've done." It's the photographer that keeps asking questions and is curious, right? And they're constantly evolving and learning. Yeah, I couldn't have said it better, Rob. You hit the
And,
nail on the head.
and they want to tell other people about it
Yeah, they're not
because
afraid to
of their
share the
enthusiasm.
information.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they are
Hmm.
teachers. That's what they're
Yeah.
doing. They're imparting that knowledge, that thing that they've seen, and they want to show people. And they
Yeah.
want to show that people in the most beautiful way they can. And
Hmm.
honestly, without exception, they are the best photographers I know.
I agree.
Yeah.
100%.
Anyway, should we leave it there?
I think that's a great place to end it.
Yeah. So next, yeah, you might enjoy the next episode actually, because we're just sort of moving on to the next one.
And we're coming up on Bird Fair too, so I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, well, it's not far away now. But yeah, next episode, well, hopefully we'll get it out probably in a couple of weeks. But we've been obviously talking about this project we've been working on, and we're going to bring Georgina on again because one, we want to do a regular feature with her anyway, and do a sort of quarterly catch up with her and what she's been getting up to in Australia, because I think that's kind of ties in quite nicely with the sort of UK, America, Australia kind of view on the world. But we've been working with her on on a project too, which we will tell you more about and discuss with her in the next episode. So I'm really excited for that, and I said we're working on a conservation thing as well, a conservation idea that I want to do more in that vein, every year trying to pick a conservation cause to try and support with this project that we're looking at. And I think people are probably guessing where we're going to go with this, but you're not going to have we're not going to let you have all the details until a couple of weeks, but we're virtually sort of ready to give some more details. So yeah, stay listening for that. So what are you up to next? Just more of the same, I guess, with spring migrants coming in and working on the garden and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I'm gonna try my best to get out as every weekend possible between now and the end of May. So I'm really looking forward to it. Things are really going to start heating up here in the I'd say in the next 2 weeks. There's new things coming in every day. It's been quiet, like I said before, but yeah, I've got some ideas too, some things I want to try differently this spring. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and I guess again for me, probably I'm trying to force myself to get out more, and just even if it's for just an hour at a time or whatever, because time is pretty limited with one thing and another at the moment. But I mean, there's so much happens in the spring, right?
Yeah,
you're spoiled for choice, and that's often the problem with me. There's so much to go for that you just think you end up doing nothing because you can't decide. So I need to be, I'm trying to be more disciplined and more focused in what I do. So I want to go back probably in the next few days. The weather's looking good. I can only manage short sessions early in the morning probably, but with the daylight hours extending and the sun rising quite early now, that gives me the opportunity to do that. So yeah, the grebes, I think, the grebes, they'll be having chicks anytime now, so I'd like to get out and and do a bit more with them. I might have an opportunity with other things that in those places as well. A lot of the warblers will be will be showing themselves, and you get things like great white egret and stuff like that, and who knows, things like cuckoo perhaps might be on the menu, but or the photographic menu at least. So yeah, just getting out short sessions, I think, and also it's orchid season nearly, so I want to do a bit more. Well, burnt tip orchids actually. That's one of the things on my mind that I want to photograph this year. For some reason, I just got that itch that needs scratching because I haven't seen them for so many years, and I don't think I've never photographed them for some reason. So, and I know there's a site. This is just down the road from me, about 1.5 miles. So, yeah, try and get some decent shots of those. And I think for when I just look at my photography, I just want to go out and see what I see and try and develop my skills based around what I come across, and it's just keep that, I don't know, keep that sort of that journey going, that photographic journey going, and so things never get stale. I know, talking about new ideas, and this is the great thing about the things that we discuss, and the other friends that we've got that we all interact with. We're always coming up with new ideas and sharing them and things like that. So that's what I want to try and do for the rest of the year. Really, is just keep things going like that. So anyway, great discussion. Yeah,
it was.
So thanks for thanks for the time and and the chat. It's always great to sort of air these opinions. So I hope people enjoy that. And well, as I said, look out for the next episode when we'll get Georgina on again, and we will talk about a project we've all been working on. So, which I think, well, it will hopefully involve some participation from as many of you as possible. Anyway. We'll leave it there. Josh, thanks again, and we'll see everybody next time.
Talk soon. Thanks.
Cheers. You have been listening to the Wildlife Photography Podcast. If you have enjoyed the content, then please help us to spread the word by sharing a link on your social media platforms, giving us a like, and leaving us a comment. See you all again next time.